What's up everyone, this is Ignatius and today I am bringing to you the final form of my Hollow Palm Amazon for the .3 season. Many of you have been following the evolution of this build throughout the season, and this is a much awaited, long anticipated release of the crit variant, which will serve as sort of the uber and min-maxed variant of the build. So up until this point, we have been working with this variant, which uses heralds, Coming Calamity, some other ways of generating charges. And now we're switching to the final form, which is crit based, which hits crit cap on Falling Thunder, involves gear that is a lot more expensive, drops all of the heralds, and takes full advantage of the Hollow Palm technique keystone. So yeah, in this video, I'm going to try to be really comprehensive so that this serves as a one-stop shop for how to do this build correctly, call out a lot of major pitfalls. I'm going to talk a lot about cost of gear and some choices you have to make with gems and gear. Going to go over gameplay and finally sort of address some things you could do if you're on a lower budget, ways you could drive to refine the build as you get started and then progress, and lastly, what could get even better compared to what I have here that I've been able to build on my own budget. All right, let's dive right in. Okay, the first thing I want to mention is sort of a disclaimer, and I put this here right in the guide. So the guide as I had it up through the tier 15 maps variant was a really cheap, low investment, high output build. I mean, I think all collective gear on this build at this point in the season was like less than a define, and you could crush tier 15 maps. Now, making the switch over to this form does not involve swapping out a piece of gear and going. You really need to have everything ready in order for the new way that this build achieves damage and speed to really click. And so what I've done here is laid out trade links for the minimum viable gear piece I would recommend. And I listed the price of that gear piece at the time of this video, which was also the same day that I wrote the update to this guide. And I'll go ahead and jump down here and say that to get started, I think you want 40 to 50 divines in gear ready for the character swap. And this really is like a PoE 1 style character swap. You don't just make one change and go from the T15 form to the final form. You really need a lot of different gear lined up, and you're going to make significant changes to gems, charge generation, defensive modes, playstyle, and the passive tree. So a massive leap is coming from here to here, and that is on purpose because this is a 1 divine build, and this is a 30 to 50 divine build to get started, and I would say 100 divine to hit like the final form that I'm going to show off in sort of the end of the video. So I want to mention that as sort of an outset and as a disclaimer. Don't just start moving pieces one at a time. Read this whole thing, understand how the new variant works, take a look at the minimum viable gear pieces, and when you feel like you're ready, you can make one big jump over to this version and then work from there. All right, so the next thing we're going to overview is skill gems. This really isn't going to be your standard skill gem overview because the way these skills interact, I have to say, is more unique than any other build I've played in PoE 2. They all work in synergy to achieve like a single mode of play, and I sort of have to explain them all at once and then break them down one at a time. So let me start by sort of explaining them all at once. The main thing we've done in this switch is we have gotten rid of Tempest Spell, and we have gotten rid of Ice Strike, and we have gotten rid of all the previous modes of generating power charges. What we have switched to is Tempest Flurry as our standard form of dealing damage and also moving. So we're going to hold down the Tempest Flurry button and bounce around. When we're in combat, this bounce around is at about 16 attacks per second, which is really fast. And then we're going to buff Tempest Flurry and augment it with some other skills. So let me talk about that first. The first buff to Tempest Flurry is adding Charged Staff, and honestly, when you get the damage really high in this build, you'll notice that this is somewhat optional for regular clearing, though I make a habit of keeping it sort of in the rotation because it's really powerful. But yeah, you're going to generate power charges and then augment Tempest Flurry with Charged Staff, which is going to shoot a lightning beam out in front of you. The next augment is Staggering Palm, and the way this works is that when you heavy stun an enemy, it is going to add a buff to all your quarterstaff attacks that turns them into projectiles. And if you heavy stun 3 enemies quickly, this buff lasts for 30 seconds with a prolonged duration. And we're also adding a ricochet and an acceleration and a nova projectiles to it. And what this is going to do is we're going to fire our main charge staff Tempest Flurry shot forward, but then we're going to have a spread of 4 nova projectiles emitting outward from Staggering Palm, and this is going to turn our character into just sort of like a moving hurricane, much like the Whirling Slash build from the .2 season. This is sort of the cornerstone of the augmentation of the Tempest Flurry. And then the last thing is Shattering Palm, and this is basically here for mobs that are a little bit stronger and definitely for density. You're going to use Shattering Palm whenever you encounter a mob moving through Abyss. It's going to allow you to dash forward at the entire range of the screen. It's going to apply a frost effect and a large AoE and start things exploding. And lastly, your Shattering Palm is also getting the Staggering Palm. So it's going to emit as a projectile, and you'll notice it's really, really potent. And this augmentation allows you to drop Tempest Bell and Ice Strike, which is really, really powerful. Okay, so that's sort of a set of 4 gems and their links. Now we're going to go into, how do we make these work, and then how do we clear big things. So there's a lot of different mechanisms for generating power charges, and this is my preferred mechanism, not necessarily because it's the most ideal for general clearing, but because you never have to change anything. You don't have to weapon swap, you don't have to gem swap, you don't have to say, okay, now I'm running Zesh, I'm going to go ahead and do this setup. This is just a one-size-fits-all. You're generating all the charges you need with just Hand of Shayula. So what this thing does is, with Culmination in and Aelith's Chimes in, as you're running around attacking, when you get 10 or more combo here, you hit your Hand of Shayula, you dash towards something and attack it, and you do 2 things. One is you proc Aelith's Chime, which gives you power charges, and if you have a lot more than 10 combo, you'll notice it gives you lots of power charges. Another is you're proccing the Charge Perfusion 2, which has a chance to give additional charges and random charges. And since you're running charge regulation, the random charges have really high value. Lastly, and this is actually really important, you're applying Sniper's Mark, which guarantees you a Frenzy Charge with the Charge Perfusion. So the charge regulation with the Frenzy Charge has 15% more skill speed, and this is how you're going to hit that really high attacks per second with the Tempest Flurry. It's going to make this speed, which looks pretty good, actually look like kind of slow when you get it going. So yeah, basically the combat style, and I'll show this off towards the end in a clip where I'll go through a couple of segments of combat and do some commentary. The combat style is to buff the Staggering Palm, use Shattering Palm and Charge Staff and Tempest Flurry to clear, and then when you need charges, slam a Hand of Shayula and you're good to go. Then it comes down to bossing and rather large rare monsters, and this is where the beautiful Falling Thunder comes into play. So you probably know about Falling Thunder. It basically capitalizes on power charges to do incredible amounts of damage to single target or to a large spread directly in front of you as a projectile. And basically, if you have 1 power charge, Falling Thunder is going to delete almost any rare that you're going to encounter in maps. But when you get to Pinnacle bosses, you're going to use Shayula to stack up 7 power charges and unleash a shotgun-style projectile attack on the boss, which, as you'll see in the end, is deleting Zesht in 1 attack. So that's sort of an overview of how all these gems work together to clear all the minions and content type in the game. Lastly, we have 2 defensive spirit gems. These are very, very important. Don't leave home without them. We've got Precision 2 in the Wind Dancer, can go in any of these 3. This is why we need 110 Spirit. You need 10 Spirit from the Amulet to get this on, and this increases our accuracy, which is crit and speed. And then, as I mentioned, Charge Regulation is going to add more crit chance, more defenses, which includes evasion, and double dips into deflection and more skill speed. So this gem, which sort of started as like an add-on the build, is now like really a cornerstone, and it augments the build in combat just an incredible amount. All right, now that I've done an overview of all the gems at large, I want to zoom in and talk about a couple of the support gem selections and some changes you might want to make in the support gems within these linkages. So first thing I want to mention is that with Tempest Flurry, everything is about speed and mana cost. So this gem at its base is a level 5 cut gem. It goes up to 10 from modifiers, but as you can see from my mana draining, it still eats mana at a pretty reasonable rate at the lowest level possible. Now, it is true that if you increase this, you will increase the base damage you're doing with Tempest Flurry, but if you're augmenting with all these things with proper combat style, you really don't need that. The other thing I'll mention is that we have Rigwald's Ferocity in here, which is more attack speed if used in weapon set 1. I do have all the primary abilities locked into weapon set 1. Since we don't actually have different weapons, we need to lock this in so that way we don't ever end up on weapon set 2 accidentally, and then, sort of deactivating the speed here, which you would probably notice, but it's worth mentioning. Okay, next a big call out is Falling Thunder itself. So I would say for major bossing, the 2 gems that are non-negotiables are Ambrosia and Culmination. Culmination is a combo gem, so you'll see this combo meter down here generate, and you get more damage per number. On Zesht, I'm hiking this up to about 80 to 100 before one-shotting him. And you'll notice on our tree, we've got a large set of combo nodes that we could take if you want to build these further. Basically saying if you're not getting the damage that you want out of Falling Thunder, or your tooltip is lower than mine, you could take these combo nodes here and build combo faster and deal more damage per combo. I used to do this when I was in a cheaper variant of the build. I also want to mention that Ambrosia is based on your maximum mana flask charges. So you want to get a mana flask that has at least 65% increased charges, which will get you to the 120 benchmark, which based on the math will maximize the value of Ambrosia. All right, now the next 3 gems are flexible. Now the linkage that is going to provide you the highest damage is going to be a close combat, an overextend, and then Dialia's Desire. I have a tooltip screenshot where my DPS in combat tooltip on here is about 1.3 million, and that is with this linkage and 7 power charges. You'll notice on the gem, we get more damage per power charge consumed, and Dialia's increases this by 10% per power charge. So really, really potent gem, but it's also a very expensive gem, and I realize a lot of people can't afford that. So if you can't afford it, there's a couple of options. One is to go with Close, Overextend, and Blindside, and I would do this if your crit damage bonus is higher than 400%. However, if you don't have a lot of crit damage bonus scaling, then you want to rely on raw damage, and that would be Close, Lightning Attunement, and Armament 2, which I can't sock it in at the moment to show you the tooltip. Last thing I want to mention is that if you have a lot of crit damage bonus, but your critical hit chance is not 100%, then what you can do is sock it in Inevitable Critical, which over time will boost it by a 200% increased chance. Then you can go back to Blindside and Overextend. Hopefully this makes sense. There's a lot of different options for achieving crit cap or just relying on base damage. And you can kind of mix and match what fits your budget and what fits where you're at in terms of crit chance and crit bonus. Maybe one more thing to say is that if you're using Falling Thunder a lot in maps, you might want to get rid of Ambrosia because it gobbles up your mana flask charges pretty quickly. I haven't encountered that I use it often. I haven't encountered losing mana flask charges because the build is fairly mana efficient in its final form, but I do think it's worth mentioning. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the skill tree. First thing I want to mention is a change I made in the ascendancy points, which is technically optional, but does seem to provide a lot of speed if you opt for what I have here. So originally, we had Mystic Harvest, which gave us Life Leech based on elemental damage. And then if you had Life Leech on a gear piece like these gloves, you would always leech life. After I added 2000 Energy Shield, Res Cap, really good evasion in combat, and really good deflection in combat, I found that my life pool never got touched. If you find this as well, then you don't need this, and you don't need the Life Leech modifier on your gloves, though it doesn't hurt. Now, if we don't need this at all, we can also hike back this, and I found the next best thing is to take a skill speed node here and come out here and take in for the kill, which we really only care about the second line here since we never walk. This gives you more skill speed while an enemy with open weakness is in your presence. This gets really good in Abysses, honestly. It's very noticeable. It's also decent on building up combo and Shayula slams for the power charges on bosses like Zesht. So that's a big call out I want to make. Looking at the broader skill tree, the first thing I want to mention is the things that are required. You have to have these. And that would be the power charge nodes. So you've got 1, 2, and 3. And that would be Falcon Dive, which gives us our base attack speed. And then that would also be the cornerstone critical damage nodes. So this wheel here, for the most part, this wheel here, for the most part, and then some other sort of scattered throughout. The other things I would say are probably essential are the key defensive nodes, and that's Enhanced Reflexes, Winter Owl, Wildcat, and Enduring Deflection. Every decision on this tree is a competition between damage and defense. And then to some extent, whether you're clearing Pinnacle bosses. So working towards that critical damage cap. In a lot of ways, you got to look at what gear do you have? What is your base critical hit chance? How do you augment that? And then finally, if you already have enough damage, how much damage can you hike back in order to get more speed? In the mix there is whether or not you're dying and whether you want to augment your defenses even more. But those are sort of the components that are in conflict when making decisions on this skill tree. So now I'll call out a few decisions that I've made that may or may not apply to you, but I think that are important to share. So one is this Time Lost Sapphire, which I have listed in the Mobilitics guide as like an optional item. When I first switched to this build, I did not have this item, and it is very expensive, 30 to 40 divines. There's 2 different versions you could go for, and I prefer this version. The big affix here that is important is the increased effect of notable passive skills in radius. We also get 7% crit chance per notable, so you can see that's very potent. But what this does is raise the base on struck through to 1.23, and then it also sort of increases what we have going on everywhere else, obviously, and then it gives us 7% crit chance on 5 different notables. So a really, really strong time lost, and because of it, it's made this whole wheel, much more potent. If you had one with a large radius, this combo node would also be in play, and so you may look at coming around here and getting that if you have a large variant of the Time Lost Jewel. Another jewel I want to call out is the Heart of the Well. Again, I have this in the optional, and I have a trade link for it. There are tons of affixes that are valuable in Heart of the Well. For me, I really wanted to reduce slowing potency debuffs, and I really wanted more skill speed. I found my damage was set, my damage was solved, so it was all about speed, and that's what I went with there. Outside of that, again, when your build hits a sort of a moment where your damage is set and you just really don't need more, then you're just working on speed. And the easiest way to work on speed is to work on your accuracy rating, which will inherently increase your overall attack speed, but also continue to nudge up your base crit hit chance, which never hurts. It creates more flexibility in the build. I think that's about it for what I would call out on the skill tree. Note that there are some crit damage bonus nodes, which I'm sort of ignoring. So there's one here, Cooked, 60% increase, but you lose global defenses. I did have this in a .2 build, but it's a little bit too rippy because we're evasion based. Right here we are taking Throat Seeker, which is crit damage bonus with reduced crit hit chance. So if you're struggling with hitting that crit cap, this is something you could hike back. Again, if you're struggling with crit cap, there is Careful Assassin up here, which reduces bonus but greatly increases crit hit chance. There's also a really good crit hit chance wheel here that I took in the early variants where I was a little bit poorer. And I think you get, 55% with these 4 nodes. So that's fairly potent. I've seen a lot of questions about like a weapon swap on this variant for bossing. I did mess around with playing with power charge carryover and things like that, and just found that It's just better to have a one-size-fits-all build, and it is totally possible with this Hollow Palm Amazon, so why not? And this is what it looks like. Okay, the final and potentially most tedious thing to go over is gear progression, selections I've made, and things I would highly recommend versus things that are flexible. I did go through carefully and outline basically 7 priorities for gear with trade links and their prices at the time of this writing in the Mobile Edict guide. So definitely use these links to get started, but also realize that these links have a lot of variance to them. So for instance, if we open up the link for rings, you'll see what I've done is create these filters over here where you can give and take things that you need and things that you don't need. So for instance, by default, you're searching for ones that have some form of leech. You may not need any leech at all. You may have it on your gloves. You may only need mana leech, so then you would turn this off. You put a one here and put a one here. So yeah, things like that. Your accuracy rating, you may want to bump it up. You may only need certain resists in certain slots, so you would, turn these off and change the value here. So yeah, all these links are like conditional starters for beginning to filter your trade. So just be thoughtful about that. I do have a really concise crafting guide on the amulet, which I can link in the description of this video, but it's also in the guide, and I have a written guide for it. Costs only 4 divs to make a super GG amulet for this build. Okay, so let's talk about gear in order of importance. So the very most important piece of gear for making the switch is an ES chest. I think 1100 energy shield is minimum for making a solid switch, and really you don't care about any other affixes on the gear to start other than base energy shield. Now, I should mention cautiously that when I first switched over, I was poor, and I think I bought an 850 or like an 880 ES chest, and I didn't worry about hitting crit cap. I think I was in like the 80% chance to crit or something like that, and it worked out, but it wasn't ideal. So yeah, this is like the cornerstone. You just need high ES. If you find one with other mods, that's great. This was like 15 divines when I bought it, and there's ones that are way better and far more potent. If you don't know, if it isn't obvious, your energy shield translates directly into base critical hit chance. So if I were able to go up to a 1200, I could redo my entire passive tree in terms of critical hit chance increase bonus modifiers and switch them to speed or critical damage bonus modifiers. So this is the cornerstone. Next most important, I think, are the helmet and the boots. And in both of these, we're just simply taking advantage of Stalking Panther, which is going to double the evasion from these pieces because you can get such high evasion rolls on these pieces. So for helmet, my min evasion is a 1200 with nothing socketed. And that's because we're going to use Ulamon's Gaze in the socket to cheat tons of base accuracy out of our evasion rating on the helmet. In my first iteration, this was just a plain evasion helmet with the Ulamon's Gaze. I ended up upgrading to one with Cold and Chaos. That originally wasn't needed. I had different rings that were denser on resists and not as dense on damage. Another line that is really good on both of these pieces is this deflection rating equal to evasion. I mean, ideally, you can throw this on all your armor, and then you could come in here to your tree and hike back some of these deflection nodes and not see a net reduction in the defense for this build. So it's like another way to like super min-max what's going on in this build is with that line. I do have that on my boots. With the boots, I think like a 1050 or 1100 evasion should be considered minimum. Again, you don't need other mods. You don't need movement speed, which is crazy and makes it much cheaper. So yeah, this is 2 and 3, gloves and boots. And with these 3 in place, your defensive layer is set. You're probably at like north of 70% evasion. And then when you get in combat and your charge regulation is increasing the defenses, you've got some nodes that are like evasion when moving. And with your resists in there, you shouldn't be dying at all in maps unless you are, playing poorly if you've hit some of these benchmarks I've outlined. Okay, gloves. There are 2 options on gloves for the base, and I think I put them both in there. Yeah, you can buy an evasion variant or an ES variant or both, which is what I do. So when I am fighting Zesht, actually, I should take that back. Now with Dialia's, my build is at a place where it's just these gloves for me. It's just the evasion gloves, maximum attack speed, no life leech. But originally, I went with ES gloves to help with critical hit chance, and I went with dual leech gloves to help with survivability. But the non-negotiables on these gloves is the +2 to melee skills, the mana leech, and you want as much flat damage of any type as you can find. The flat damage competes with the defensive modifiers. Now for evasion gloves, I think like 400 evasion is good. This one is at 579. You can get one with multiple sockets that can go even higher than this. You notice the base evasion rolls aren't even that great on this. I really should look into like crafting a perfect version of these gloves to move even faster. That may be something I get into. Some people are socketing the attack speed modifiers into the glove sockets, which is really, really powerful, or rolling a flat attack speed on them. Gloves is a slot that is somewhat flexible outside of the melee skills and the mana leech, and that can scale in multiple directions with great variance. All right, the next set piece is the amulet. Again, in the guide, I have outlined how to craft this amulet. It is like a 4 divine deterministic craft. If you whiff on some of the gamble properties, you can sell the one that you made and start over. Generally, what you're getting is a 4 guaranteed property, which is melee skills, crit hit chance, crit hit bonus, and global defenses. And then you pad on additional defenses where you can. Okay, next up are the rings and the ingenuity. And basically, you're using rings exclusively for 2 things: finishing your resists and adding flat damage and accuracy. So on both of these rings, I have a 400 accuracy roll. I have 3 resist affixes and 2 flat damage affixes. And based on what resist you were able to, get into these other pieces, you can decide how much more you want here. I did want to be chaos res capped. That was like a requirement for me because of all the abyss effects this season. But check out what my resists go to when I pull these 2 off. Almost 0 on these 2. Pretty bad on these 2. I think my gloves are supplementing the lightning. So yeah, and the gloves are like swappable, right? So yeah, these I've got, the fire modifier catalysts here to help with all of the resist, but it also boosts the fire. Over here, I've got the chaos modifier since I have 2 chaos properties. Ideally, these were honestly fairly cheap rings. I think these were like 3 to 5 div. If I made a lot more currency and I wanted to make another upgrade to the build, what would be easy to do? Oh, and I just realized because I'm in this zone, it's not really showing you what the resist should be. Let me move over and we can see what they actually would be with proper reduction. But yeah, what I will do in a later and more improved variant of this build is purchase ones that have, oh my god, better resist rolls. Okay, that's what I thought. So when you pull these off, look at this, -25, -22, 12, and 33. So the rings plus the ingenuity are solving resists and then adding flat damage. For the belt, ingenuity is pretty straightforward. Here was my old version. It was like, I don't know, 20 exalt. Here's my new version. It was like 4 div. And basically all I did was buy one that has an overroll in one of the ring bonuses to create more flexibility for resists. Now, a huge call out on ingenuity is something that most people don't realize, and this is the charge charmed used property. You don't want this to be a positive value. If it says 1% increased or more, this can deactivate certain charms, making them require more charges than they actually possess. So, the build may grow, you may change out your charms, and you just want to avoid that in general. So yeah, rings, ingenuity, these are the final pieces, and you just want to patch your resists, and then with what's left, get some flat damage and accuracy. As far as charms, I like this Beast of the Mountains. You just get random power charges, that's great. We really don't want to be frozen ever, so this is sort of essential. This is just a crappy one from the campaign. And then I really like Forsaken Bangle. It basically gives you recoup for chaos damage, which really helps with the Abyss. Final call out is Jewels. I already talked about the Time Lost and the Heart of the Well, so that leaves basic Jewels, which is probably what you'll start with. And for these, you're looking for crit hit chance and crit bonus, and then anything else you want. I have shock magnitude here. I think my shock on Zesht is 43%, which is not irrelevant. And then on this other one, I have accuracy and evasion. So just some defensive bonus. Neither of these is min-maxed, so these could be higher. Also keep in mind that you can go out. So right now, a perfectly rolled crit chance crit bonus somehow is only like 4 divines. But if for some reason it's really expensive, especially after this guide, you could go out and buy one where the rolls are not perfect, and then you could divine it yourself. So you could buy like a 510 for probably like an Exalt, and then hit it with like 2 divines and probably have a pretty decent roll. Just important to note there. All right, so for the first gameplay show off, and in this one I'm going to do more of like a play-by-play of how the mechanics are working so you can see the tooltips and how they activate. We're going to run a super juiced tier 15. So, you know, this is a fully modded Delirious with an Abyssal modifier, tier 15 Waystone. And I've chosen a map that has a layout that isn't awful. I'm pretty sure Steaming Springs is pretty good. And it also has a boss and a breach and a ritual, so I can talk about how to run through those. All right, so hopefully you watched the skill gem overview, but I'll still talk a little bit about what I'm going to do in this map. So the first thing I'm going to do is strike the first few enemies with a staggering palm. You're going to see a little gray tooltip show up here, and that indicates that we have successfully stunned and applied our buff that creates the Nova projectiles and turns all of our quarterstaff skills into projectile skills. After the staggering palm, I'm going to do a few shattering palms, probably. Just kind of depends on how it goes. Along with spamming Tempest Flurry to basically clear the first few rounds of minions and then to build up combo on Hand of Shayula. As soon as I have some combo on Shayula, I'm going to slam that and get power charges. And somewhere in there, I'm going to activate charge staffs, which again, I mentioned this earlier, like I'm at so much damage, this piece is kind of optional, but I just like to do it to be systematic about it. So basically all those things are going to happen here, even though it sounds like a lot, it's going to happen very quickly. And the mechanics of it are very simple once you get good at it. So here we go. Okay. It doesn't show the tooltips. Maybe if I do this. All right, so you can see I've already hit the max uptime on this staggering force is 30 seconds. So I managed to stun 3 enemies there in just a matter of, you know, a split second. And now I have 30 seconds of Nova projectile, staggering palm. And I've already got 5 combo on my Hand of Shayula. So now we're going to go out. We're going to do a few shattering palms with some more Tempest Flurry, and then we're going to Shayula. Remember, the Shayula is going to give us a frenzy charge, so that way our attacks per second goes up to 16 to 17. And it's also going to give us power charges, which is going to set up our charge staff. So here we go. Looks like we have an Abyss right out the gate, so I kind of got to, go quickly here, but let me pause again. All right, so another second has transpired or so. We did get that frenzy charge. I think we got a power charge in there, and I used it on the Falling Thunder for that queen who showed up, and you saw she got deleted very quickly. So basically, we're using our skills. Everything's dying extremely fast. We've already used Falling Thunder to delete a massive rare monster, and now we'll just continue. All right, I've got 3 power charges, so this is a decent time to go ahead and use the charge staff. And now we're like fully kicking. And even though this took a long time to explain, that sort of opening buff mechanism takes about 5 seconds to get into place. And then it has a few moments of like redoing the uptime on it, right? So you kind of alternate between staggering palm, shattering palm, and Shayula as you go throughout the build. And this keeps everything going for you. I'm just going to ignore loot, sorry. All right, let's pause, see where we're at. So, Staggering Palm is finally almost gone. We've had an Innervate proc in there. I've done 2 charge staffs, but obviously I'm going to need to do some more. And we've cleared like lots of stuff already, I'm pretty sure. I think more than anything, I just need to hit Shayula more to get more of the power charges going. All right, here's the Abyss. This should be fun and a good example of like just how potent this build is in huge mobs. I'm going to try not to talk so much so that way you're just kind of seeing how it works. I'm bad about that. So hopefully you can see like the build. I don't know. Can you clear faster than this? I mean, I think I'm going to clear faster than this in a future variant of the build where I stack more evasion and more accuracy, which is in my plans. I want to get my attacks per second up to like 20, and then I may switch to like doing just Sakamas when I get there. But yeah, you can see the clear speed is like off the charts. I haven't taken any damage. I don't think my life pool has even been dipped into yet, and I have no ES leech or anything fancy like that. We just are alternating these little abilities, not at this point in any real systematic way, and we're just crushing. I should probably pick up that Divine Orb, right? If at any point we hit a rare that is problematic, you see we have 7 power charges, and the Falling Thunder at 7 power charges is an absolutely ridiculous skill. Let's see if I can find something to use it on. Use it on these guys. See how it goes all the way out here and clears this whole path? So yeah, pretty awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop this segment of the demo here. I'm going to run over to the boss, and I'll start out completely unbuffed and show you what we do for an unbuffed boss. Okay, here we are. We're coming up on Manasa, the Serpent Queen. I'm sort of waiting for all my buffs to expire. Basically, we're going to dash in here. We're going to spam Tempest Flurry on her. We don't care about Staggering Palm because we don't need the projectile hit. When our Shayula gets to like, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30, I'm going to slam it, and that's going to give me the power charges I need for Falling Thunder. Then we're going to slam Falling Thunder, and she's going to die. Now, if you sprint up to these bosses in combat and you're already buffed, you know, they're just going to die like instantly. Like, it won't take that long at all. But that was probably overkill. Maybe you only need 1 power charge on it. I don't know. I went up to 3, I think, there. But you can see it's very potent, very powerful. All right, the next section of gameplay I want to show off is Pinnacle content. I want to show off deleting Zesht really quickly and also just clearing the breach zone very efficiently because, you know, the monsters, they do deal a lot of damage and they're pretty messy. As soon as our pre-buff is finished, it's really, really clean and fast. Just like with the mapping, we're going to get in there and start off with Staggering Palm, go into Tempest Flurry, get some charges, use our charge staff. By about 5 to 10 seconds in, we're going to be fully buffed and we're just going to be zooming through here. Well, there we go. I think we're fully buffed already. And you can see how fast it is. I didn't think it would be possible, but this build has turned out to be faster and more powerful than my .2 Flicker build, which was also Amazon and actually used a weapon. I thought the nerfs to Flicker Strike were going to make it so that it would be really difficult to reproduce like how powerful that build was. But not true. This one's faster and has higher single target, I think. All right, so this sort of makes the point, and I probably don't need to show this whole clear. I'm going to go ahead and pause here and edit to the end of this cut where I'm actually killing Zesht. All right, so the area is clear, obviously. And I'm just going to grab some loot here. And I won't waste your time, head right on over there. So Zesht is going to come out. We're just going to spam Tempest Flurry on him. I may have to dodge his unevadable one-shots in here. We'll hit a Shayula until we get to 7 power charges, and then we will unleash the Falling Thunder. So here's a nuke we have to dodge. Come back in here. We're at 4 power charges. 7. And let's see if I can line it up. Boom. There you go. Now, I've been getting to 100 combo before unleashing. I think it could be lower already. And then definitely if we continue to scale crit chance, we can, you know, sacrifice crit chance nodes on the tree to then scale up crit damage bonus a little more. But obviously this is pretty good for now, and I'm pretty happy with it. This is the type of combat you'll see against any of the Pinnacle bosses. I think Zesht is the tankiest among them, so yay. Okay, now we're getting into the closing sections of this guide. I want to go through common mistakes in FAQ first. Number 1, most common question I see in Discord in the conversations is, why am I dying? I am not tanky enough. Now, I have a hard, clear-cut answer in terms of the stats to this question, and then it's going to come down to gameplay. If your evasion and deflection are high, so if you are near 80% evade in combat, and if your deflect is at 70% or higher with a 45% reduction, and you are res capped, with chaos being like somewhat optional, though it is very important, you should not be dying at all to anything. Maybe a boss one shot that you didn't dodge, but I never die in regular content. I think my last death was to Monkey Boss showing up out of nowhere and embarrassingly slamming me while I mistimed dodge roll. But yeah, you shouldn't be dying at all. You now have this cushion of energy shield. I die so infrequently that I took off Mystic Harvest and Life Leech altogether. So yeah, if you've hit these benchmarks and you're still dying, it is gameplay issues. And basically what that means is you're using these mechanics inefficiently, or you're just not navigating the combat scope well enough. So you're welcome to watch more gameplay of other Hollow Palm players. You're also welcome to watch. I get a few streams in a couple times a week where I just go through maps or Pinnacle content over and over. I have VODs of these on YouTube. But yeah, if you've hit these benchmarks for evasion, deflection, and resist, you're good to go. Then you just have to get better. Why am I slow? I have no movement speed on the entire build. We're slow as heck, but we go really, really fast when we attack. Just keep your Tempest Flurry at a low level, and you can fly around faster than any movement speed for free. Out of mana is a common problem, and I do think this is gameplay efficiency. You're just like over spamming certain spells. Like Staggering Palm will run us out really fast if we overuse it without leeching it. Shayula is pretty fast too. Shattering Palm is fast, right? But the Tempest Flurry low level is pretty good. On the tree, I don't even have Siphon anymore. I have no recovery on Jewels. Some people put a recovery on Heart of the Well. Now I do have Mana Leech here, and then Walker of the Wilds here. This is a low roll. This is tier 4, and it's on the lower end. And then I do have Walker of the Wilds, but that's sufficient. So if you're running out of mana, it's gameplay issues. You need to use your mana, more efficiently. If you just want the extra cushion, you can add Siphon. You can add recovery to Sapphires, and then you could beef up the Mana Leech nodes here. You can also put them on your rings. Number 4, why do I not have charges? In the previous version, we did Reaper's Invocation, so I won't address that. But in this one, we're doing Hand of Shayula. If you're struggling with charges, I think the most common reason is you're not waiting for the combo to get to 10. So if you just spam Shayula around, you'll never get a power charge. If you read A-List Chimes, it's giving you a 10% chance per combo, and then it can exceed 100, and it can give you multiple per hit. So I think I get like sometimes 5 power charges in one Shayula. How do I pre-buff charges for Pinnacle bosses? We talked about that. Just build up combo, use Shayula, it procs Sniper's Mark and Elemental Weakness. Lastly, if you have a different question, come on over to Discord. I check it every day. It's my main space I hang out in during the day, and we'll answer questions. We also have a lot of helpful folks in the Discord. I've promoted a few to PoE Guru in the channel role, and these are people whose advice is really trusted, who are very proficient and knowledgeable about the game, just high, big brain players, and they're also usually pretty active. All right, next big section and question is calculating critical hit chance. This is like a really complex question to answer, and I'm not going to give you a direct answer, but I'm going to give you tools to help you get closer to the direct answer. So in your tooltip, you're going to see 2 areas where it represents your critical hit chance. Right here, 60.48, and right here, 13.16 to 18.43. Now, what are these? This one right here is your base critical hit chance multiplied by your percent increase without the Amazon Ascendancy. This one here is a variance of the additive from the Amazon Ascendancy, which is based on hit chance, which changes based on range and changes based on monster evasion. So already within this tooltip, it is unreliable. Now I will say when you hit a completely agnostic 100, this thing will go away and it'll just say 100% here, and that's it. And that's the game knowing that no matter how far away the monster is or what monster it is, you're at 100%. But also when it says that, you're probably well overcapped. So now I'll point out a few more tools that you can help to evaluate your critical hit chance. One is I have a Hollow Palm base crit calculator tool, and then I have an Amazon crit calculator tool based on accuracy and chance to hit. These numbers, if you copy and paste these spreadsheets into your own and play around with them, you'll understand more how the mechanics are interacting to create some of the math results for your crit chance. And then lastly, you need to bring your build into Path of Building. And what you want to do is come into the calc section, select the skill where you're interested in knowing what the crit chance is. So for me, it's Falling Thunder, it's projectiles, and it's in combat, which includes these buffs. And here's what the tooltip is saying. It's saying I have 100% chance to crit. And here's the calculation. So here's the 5 base from, just being unarmed. Here's the Hollow Palm plus Amazon base. And then here is my increase. Here is my more, I think mostly from the power charge consumption. And you'll see that even in this condition, I am overcapped by 7.95%, which is 25% increased critical hit chance on the tree. So that does mean that with this setup, I could come in here and hike back increased critical hit chance nodes. So if I take this one off, for instance, and we come back over here and have it redo it, now I'm at 4.79% overcapped, and which translates to 15% increased critical hit chance for me. Now, I do like to be slightly overcapped just to account for the chance that the monster has higher evasion than what this is taking into account. Let me talk about that evasion number really quick. So a lot of people don't realize this about the Amazon Ascendancy. You probably do by now because you've probably been following me in my builds. But you're getting base crit hit chance equal to excess chance to hit with attacks. And that takes into account the monster's chance to evade. So in the POB configuration, I have a Guardian Pinnacle boss, but I have changed the base evasion of this monster to account for MAME and changes to reduction in Pinnacle boss evasion that POB has not included yet, which were in the patch notes. 400 is not the exact number for any particular boss. That's just my operable number, and that's why I do like to be a little bit overcapped here, just in case. Now, you'll notice you can do different things to, massively adjust your critical hit chance. So one thing I mentioned earlier was that you could take out close combat, and if it'll load, there we go. And you can add in, if it'll let me, inevitable critical. Can you please put that in? There we go. Is it in? Okay, inevitable critical. Then you can come over here to the configuration and you say seconds since an inevitable crit, and we'll just say 40 or something. And then we'll go back over here. And now you can see I'm overcapped by 67.92% or 215% increased critical hit chance. So, in one world, I could put inevitable critical in, and this may even be better. This isn't just some fictitious world. I may need to do the math and do this, but then come in my tree and hike back every critical hit chance node I have. One of the reasons I'm not beelining to do this and recommend it is that this is just for Falling Thunder, just with this conditional gem. And I like to, as I said, have a cut and dry, one size fit all, crush all content build. So, things like this are not great for that. However, if you're way behind on critical hit chance for various reasons, this is a nice little band-aid you can put into your Falling Thunder to make ends meet. Hopefully that helps guide you on understanding your, main hand critical hit chance, the MH crit chance here, and then scaling the multiplier from there. All right, everyone, that about wraps it up for what I had scoped for this video. I did make a focus on this video to edit less and provide high quality content more. So it's like a little less boring, or sorry, a little more boring and a little less catchy, but it is very heavy on quality content that I feel really confident in conveying to you all. And I hope you appreciate that. I want to give one more final plug for the Discord. I work really hard on making this Discord a, as close knit as possible, active community of people who are positive and proactive about, the good parts of working on PoE2 builds and just this game in general. And that's definitely what's going on here. So come on by, participate in the discussion, take a look at the different areas in here. We do have a section for crafting, and we have some people who are posting like deterministic methods for crafting important pieces of gear. I do have my updated loot filter and hideout here with the custom sounds that I use on my build. We have a dedicated channel for HoloPalm where people are posting resources for other crafting mechanisms, and also a lot of Q&A like, what about this node? What's going on in my POB? So be sure to check that out. I've got some channels for other builds. We've got the tinfoil hat section for whatever the heck you might be theory crafting or have in the kitchen. And yeah, just lots of good stuff on here. A huge thanks to everyone in the community who contributes to this Discord and helps each other out and contributes to the ongoing, constructive thought, especially on HoloPalm. At this point in my build, I do think in a lot of ways it's an original. This is what I had planned to do before the season even started, and it worked out. And I'm proud of that. To some extent, I got lucky, but to some extent, I just understood the mechanics in the patch notes and we've applied them. Then there's like half or more that has just been like cumulative effort from the community in this Discord and the PoE community at large that has led to the highest form of this build. That has taken time and productive conversation. So thank you all for being a part of this process, and I present this back to you as sort of a shared construction that has come from the community. So thank you, everyone, and good luck out there smashing PoE2.